Yes.
So you need to contextualize your faith with hadith. However, there's fabrications in hadith, and you can find some really ridiculous hadiths, like if you eat an apple, you know, like I don't know, like crazy.
I haven't read that one. Yeah. Go on.
So some hadiths just seem like they were made up to prove a point or to, you know.
Yeah.
So how can you contextualize your faith with that which is fabricated? How someone like me, not like you, can look through and be like, yeah, this hadith is accurate, you know?
Well, I mean, there are conditions for the acceptance of hadith, right? So the conditions that are for the acceptance of hadith are things like the hadith has to be in line with the Quranic narrative. It has to have sahih. It has to be, the sanad has to be sahih. Even if the sanad of the hadith is not sahih, sometimes it can be rejected. So sometimes if it's even the hadith, his sanad is strong, it can be rejected if it contradicts the Quran or other hadith.
So that means everything contradicts, if it's, you know, you look at the narrators.
Yeah. So yeah.
And if you find that and it contradicts the Quran, then how do you know other stuff that have the correct narration?
So a lot of the scholars will come and look at that and see if there's any way through usul, which is a whole system, that they can conciliate between them. If not, then they would reject the hadith.
Do you think?
And that's been done in Sahih Muslim, by the way. There's a hadith in Sahih Muslim which talks about Adam being created on Friday. Have you put your hands up if you heard the hadith? All right, the hadith is it has a sahih chain, but it's rejected by Bukhari even. Why? Because it goes against the ayat of the Quran.
Would you say that's fabricated hadith?
No, you just say that according to the muhaddithin, they say that this hadith is called hadith al-turab. Some refer to it as that. It's in Sahih Muslim. Because Adam was created from dirt on Friday, yeah? So, I'm not saying that there's not hadith. I'm not sure if there's another hadith that says he was created on Friday. I'm talking about this particular one, Sahih Muslim.
Like the days, Monday, Tuesday, that's something we've constructed.
Yeah. So this...
So, of course, that's very...
Well, I mean, no, but...
Do you know what I mean?
In Arabic, the word for Yawm al-Ithnain is like literally the second day. Yawm al-Ahad means the first day. Yawm al-Ithnain means the second day. Yawm al-Thulatha means the third day.
Yeah.
That's all it means. It's not like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which in English, by the way, do you know where they come from? Do you know where Monday comes from? Do you know? Do you know the Anglo-Saxons had gods, right? So in English, the word Wednesday, like Thursday comes from, I think, like one of the Anglo-Saxon gods. So each of the days... Anyways, so Monday, the English lexical Monday, Tuesday is different to in Arabic, Yawm al-Ahad, Yawm al-Ithnain, Yawm al-Thulatha, Yawm al-Arba', etc. Which literally means the first day, second day, third day, fourth day. So it was not a problem. But the point is this, that hadith was rejected. So we have a system which shows all these things. Sometimes the hadith can be completely, and this is going to sound controversial, but can be completely irrational.
Yeah.
It's irrational in a sense. I'm not saying in a moral sense, because morality is defined by Islam. We're talking about, because once again, if you say I don't understand how this hadith can be because my morality doesn't fit in with it,
It's not even about
not that. I'm talking about things like, for example, that there was a hadith that I think, remember Dhahabi, right? There's a hadith that someone came and he said that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ held a book that had all of the information of all of us from now until the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So Imam Dhahabi, he wrote Sir Alam al-Nubala, one of the biggest books and most impressive books in hadith and tarjih, and he said that, throw this hadith away. He said, how could it be? He goes, how big would this book be? This is what he said. You know, he said, how big would this book be if it had all information of all the human beings until Yawm al-Qiyamah? He said, it doesn't fit any rational model. So the hadith, even though it had okay sanad, he put it to the side. So sometimes that does happen. Sometimes when an irrational hadith comes to the fore, the muhaddithin, they do reject it, despite it being strong.
When you say reject it, do they physically get rid of it? Or is it
They just say that we don't accept it. Rejection.
There's other people that will look at, for example, whoever leaves his religion, kill him. They will look at that and they would genuinely believe that.
Well, no, I mean, that's, once again, now you're what we said before, you cannot confuse aesthetic moral judgment with that which is logically impossible. These are two different things. Aesthetic moral judgment is you are a product of your socialization, yeah? 21st century socialization. You have a liberal belief. Now you're going to impose that liberal belief on the hadith. No, that's different.
It's not even that. It's the
Go
fact that in the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, it says, and whoever...
فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ
There you
فَلْيَكْفُرْ.
go. If I find this hadith, it can...
طيب, it says أَعْمِلُوا مَا شِئْتُمْ. In the Quran it says أَعْمِلُوا مَا شِئْتُمْ. Do whatever you want to do. Okay? You have to understand the Arabic here because it says, do whatever you want to do. اعملوا ما شئتم. Do whatever you want to do. Okay, so get me some women.
No, but is it get me?
No.
What is the verse? What is all of the verses like? It's
No.
getting me, like,
No. This is the point. The point is, this verse and other verses is للتهديد, which means it is a way of threatening the people. It says, do whatever you want and you will see. It's محذوف. It's like ellipsis. Do whatever you want and you will see kind of thing. Yeah. The point is this. فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر is للتهديد. Same thing. If whoever wants to can believe and whoever wants to can disbelieve. But you'll see. If you disbelieve, you'll see what happens. It's the same thing. It's the same kind of. It's in parentheses. It's not there. It's not written explicitly, but it's there. So clearly
someone should be killed if they leave Islam.
No, look, people here in this country.
Does Islam say that?
In this country, we do have laws which we do abide by. Yeah, and so if someone, and there's lots of people that have come here, when we have discussions with them, we don't kill them, right? The point is this.
No, I'm not saying about
Yes. I'm not talking about my opinion. In the context which we live in, which is the Western context, the world that we live in here, the West, we have certain processes and laws. We don't live in an Islamic state. And even in an Islamic state, it has a completely different system. So this idea of men baddala dinahu faqtuluhu, this whoever changes religion to kill him, has his own understanding in that context. It's not something which is, okay, well, let's go and kill everyone now. It's not like that. It has its own theological understanding. But here once again, we have to understand why are you asking that question. This is more important because the question is this. Let's assume for the sake of argument, and this is not what we believe, but let's assume for the sake of argument, it means that explicitly even for the West or even for everything. Let's for the sake of argument. Does that necessitate falsity? Does that false? Would that disprove Islam? No, it wouldn't disprove Islam. Why? Because actually, how I started this discussion is how I'll hopefully end it. Barbarism, it is not a measure for falsehood. If you say this is a very barbaric, cruel punishment of Islam, look at this one, look at that one. Who cares? Something which is barbaric can be very effective. You know, in the years 1553 to 1558, you had a queen here called Queen Mary. Queen Mary executed 287 Protestants, because she was a Catholic. 287 Protestants. She burnt them at the stake, yeah? Okay, we're not saying that's right. We don't agree with it, by the way, of course, yeah? But we're saying, one historian, his name is Eamon Duffy. Do you know what he said about this? He says, this was a devastatingly effective. Wait a minute, what did he say? He said this was devastatingly effective thing that she did. Now why? Because frankly, it worked for what she was trying to do. Now we're saying that what she tried to do was wrong, yeah? But her agenda was to try and make England into a Catholic country again. So if that's what her agenda is, it works for what she was trying to do. The question is this: should we judge a law based on its complicity with liberal standards or its effectiveness in social, economic and political terms? I would put to you that there would be no objective reason for us to judge a law on aesthetic value judgments, which are the product of 21st century thinking. There's no philosophical reason for us to do that. So if we say, okay, well, this is wrong because it says this, the Quran is wrong because it says this, which I don't like, and it's against society. Well, I say, how do we know society is right? I would say what the Quran says. I say, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Bring your evidences if you're truthful. You know, the crime of yesterday was this. That before you had people coming into our countries, colonial masters, that came into our countries and literally were explicitly racist with us, told us, hey, black man, you know, we're white, you're closer to monkeys, you're like Darwin said, in the descent of man, in 1859 or whatever he wrote. He said that the black people are like the barbarians, the savages. You're closer to monkeys, you guys are non-human, whatever. You have a lower race, we're going to overtake you, we're going to put our ideas on you. The guy says, okay, give me your evidences. So no, forget about evidences. We're still going to overtake. We're going to take over by force. No worries. Do you know, Wallahi al-Azim, yeah? I swear to God, those people were better than us. You know why? Because they fought back. A lot of them fought back. Not everyone, but a lot of them fought back. Like the Mau Mau, yeah? Like the Kenyan Mau Mau. Or like in India when they fought back against colonial rule and all these things. But do you know how weak we are? That now they're telling us and they're not fighting us and we're accepting it. So now they're saying be liberal, be white, be post-colonial, believe in what we believe in. You say, where's the evidences? I want to have evidence. I want objective evidences so I can be with you. You say, listen, I'm not going to give you evidences, but I'm going to show you 100 episodes of Friends, 200 episodes of The Simpsons, 500 films, okay, and I'm going to give you an education, a Western education, and you're going to believe in what I believe in. Otherwise, you're going to be socially ostracized. You're going to be socially alien. And you know what we say? Because we live in the West, or because we glorify the West, we say, you know what? You don't need to fight me. I believe in what you believe in. I am the same as you. How embarrassing that is. How embarrassing. How humiliating. How humiliated are we? You know, when the French came to Algeria, they killed so many thousands, tens of thousands of Algerians, hundreds of thousands of Algerians. But you know, they couldn't even secure the religion of the colonial master in that area. They couldn't change people from being Muslim to Christian. And now people are voluntarily changing the whole ideology. Why? Because the white man said so. It's as simple as that. He doesn't even need to show you his guns anymore, or his knives, or his swords. He just says, I believe that democracy is this and that, and the truth and that, liberalism and individualism and all these things, and we know now, and scientism and all of these things, and you say, okay, سمعنا وأطعنا. You know, I was going to say غفرانك ربنا, but it's not this. He says, but where's the evidences for these things? When we examine it as we have today, the basis of these philosophical precepts, فيه نظر, as the Arabs say, there are some issues with it. We cannot accept these things wholesale, and we will not measure our religion based on those things. And the moment we do that, is we failed. We have failed.
All right, okay, let me use this. I'm a liberal, for example,
Okay.
for argument's sake. I live in a liberal society. I decide liberalism is not for me, it's an ideology.
All right.
I leave liberalism. The liberal people who are in charge come and kill me
Yes.
for leaving that.
That's what
ideology.
happens.
No, okay, no. But I mean, like, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Someone can leave Islam, for example.
See,
and
look.
if they killed, how would they ever go back to it?
Can I tell you something, right? You are applying... let me ask you a ridiculous question. Do you know when you see Jeremy Paxman and these other reporters sit a Muslim down and ask them questions? You know what the kind of questions they'll ask them? Apostasy. Your religion says this, that. Answer. You know, it's not very liberal. It's not very nice. If I sat Jeremy Paxman down, I was the presenter, and I said to him, listen, now, I want to ask you a question. Why don't you believe in God? Why don't you pray 5 times a day? What's wrong with you? You know how I would look? I would look absolutely embarrassing.
Do we have free will?
Hold on. Do you see what I'm saying? I would look... Why? Because, do you know why? The reason why I would look embarrassing? Because I am using my true standard on someone who does not believe in my true standard.
Fair enough. Okay, this
Do you get it?
world is supposed to be a test, right?
Yes.
So whoever believes
Yeah.
gets what he
Yes,
believes,
yes.
and whoever disbelieves gets what he
Yes,
believes.
yes.
So that's what I'm trying to say to you is, how do you have free will if you're killed for leaving a religion?
Listen, as I said to you before, there were people called the munafiq. I didn't say this to you before. There were people called the munafiqun. They were the... Hudayfa had a list of people that were the munafiqun who were not Muslim. They didn't believe in Islam. Yes, and they were not killed. It's not just a matter of belief. Allah has given us the choice to make our decision, all right? However, it's not that. It's more a political thing. This whole irtidad and ridda thing is linked with political infrastructures in the context of an Islamic state. It's not as easy as you think it is in Islamic discourse. We have objective reason to believe that this is the purpose of life, yeah? We don't assume that untethered individualism is the be-all and end-all. We don't believe that. That's not our belief. So that's not our presupposition. Do you know, the question is this. When you deal with someone, you have to deal with them as per the presuppositions of whatever they believe in is. If you deal with a feminist, you say, okay, you believe in equality, but how comes you're not being equal here? If you deal with a liberal, you say, you believe in liberalism, but you're not being liberal here. But if you deal with a Muslim, you say, you believe in submission to God, but how comes you're not being Muslim here?
But there is, people define, like, within feminism there are sects, within liberalism there is sects. You're never going to find someone, people agree, you know?
What I'm trying to say to you is that you're using liberal, stretchy liberal ideas to measure Islamic theological precepts. And I'm saying, if you can't even prove those to be objective, then there's no use you measuring it with the Islamic thesis, because the Islamic thesis is in no need to be measured by a subjective morality of a white man who's had forced it for 400 years and continues to force it down our throats today. We don't need the white man to force us.
Okay, you know the seerah of the Prophet?
Yes.
There's fabrications in that as well, right?
Yeah.
So how do you...
There's fabrications in the hadith and fabrications in the seerah. Yes.
But not in the Quran?
Not in the Quran.
Something before when you were saying different hadiths can be falsified based on the narrators.
Yes,
How
yes.
can you tell if those references haven't been made up and falsified?
Well,
the line is staying true.
Well, I mean, they have a whole system of doing that, right? And there are conditions for a hadith to be accepted. And so, for example, the narrators have to be thiqah. They have to be trustworthy. They have to have good hifz, dabt, which.
How do you know that someone's just sort of written that narrator's name down on this page and said this was from this book?
Yeah, so there would be some kind of, you'd look at where he lived and who saw him and who met him.
You mean look at who lives? Can you historically track?
Pardon?
I say this historically because even if you have historical information, doesn't mean it's accurate. The Romans, for example, they rewrote their history.
Yeah. So we would cross-reference biographies with biographies. So you have.
It's just paper, or it's been written down, so it's subject to be changed.
Yeah, but then you have the question. Yeah, look, with how do you know King Henry VIII lived? How do you know that? You don't know that. No, you do know that. But how do you know that? I mean, if we were to deliver a history class today about King Henry VIII in any British university, is the academic gonna come up and say, well, you know, guys, we don't really know that King Henry VIII lived?
Academic, for example, there are academic books that are not necessarily correct.
Yeah, I understand. But how do we know anyone lived? How do you know?
That's the point. You don't.
How do you know the Holocaust happened?
You don't.
Okay.
That could be stated. I'm not saying it did. But you don't actually know. You only know that which you can empirically test. And even
All right. Well, okay. Have the same. If you have that belief, then you don't believe in any science. Most of the things you believe in is based on testimony.
Of course.
All right. So you believe in science because of testimony. You haven't gone to. Well, you believe it. Like, do you go to the doctors? All right. If you're ill, you go to the doctors. They give you a prescription, which is based on scientific method. Now, have you carried out those scientific things? Okay. But how do you know? You trust on the person who told you, the doctor who trusts scientists.
So you trust those biographies?
Yes. We trust it as history, the same way that people would trust. It's history.
It's really a question for information. I wasn't like.
Yeah, of course. So it's the same thing. It's just like testimony. We believe it. So.
Obviously, I'm coming here to ask you your testimony. So
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But is there any other questions? Do you get what I'm saying here? What I think you guys have to do. Of course.
I never used to know this. Obviously, I met some sisters, and they say that the niqab is actually fard.
Yes.
I haven't. No matter how much information I read, I will never be able to attain everything to fully conclude. Do you know what I mean? My lifespan won't allow that, I believe. So, what is
The position on
what's
that.
your opinion?
I don't know. My position, I don't know. Yeah. So, okay. So I would say you have two main opinions within the Islamic discourse. One that is fard, and one that is mustahab. Some say that it doesn't exist in Islam. They are lies. Mustahab is like sunnah. It's not fard.
Sunnah is not fard.
No, the word sunnah could mean something which is fard sometimes, and could mean something which is masnoona, manduba, mustahabba, which are basically things which preferred. Yes. Do you get it? So some say that. The majority, I would say, probably don't say that it's fard. The vast majority don't say that it's fard. But it doesn't mean just because the majority says something.
Some school of thought.
Yes. No. Like the school of thought, the Hanbali school of thought. They see a lot of scholars. They do say that it's fard.
Can I ask you one personal question?
Yeah.
Because my sister's looking into Salafism and it's
Yeah.
cool, but do you align yourself with any sect within Islam? Or do you follow
Well,
school of thought?
look.
Do you just say innocently, I'm just a Muslim?
No, I don't. it's not as easy as that. I think people that watch my videos know that I definitely associate with Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? In Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, I've got more of a learning, like I was taught the Hanbali way, yeah, the Hanbali school of thought. But, so I am more in that way. Like, I'm more, if I don't know anything, I just look at what the madhab says from that perspective, to be honest with you. So, so the Hanbali school of thought, most of my fiqhi information comes from that.
So, which site would you recommend to get honest information? Because there's a lot of anti-Islamic sites.
What websites?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What is up with the fatwas? Why do people need to make a fatwa? Like, we know something is illegal. Like, why do you need to make a fatwa to stop people from smoking cigarettes? Do you know what I mean? Like, is a fatwa? What is a fatwa? Did it exist at the time of the Prophet?
Yeah, fatwa. In the Quran, يستفتونك عن النساء. In the Quran, they ask you for a fatwa on women. Oh, it's on. You're right. You're good, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of fatwas. But the point is this. A fatwa is when you're trying to, because there's two things. There's ta'sil al-hukm and tanzil al-hukm. Ta'sil is when we know what a hukm is, a ruling is, because it's mentioned in the Quran. As we said before, however, how that actually comes, how it actually actualizes, right, materializes in the domain is where the fatwa comes in. So someone to make a fatwa has to be a mufti, or let's say a mujtahid, or someone who's able to do that. So that's why they look at the situation and say, okay, well, let's look at the Islamic corpus and see what's most appropriate for that particular situation.
Thank you so much.
Is that it? So what I would advise, we live in a world today, yeah, wallahi, let me tell you something. I just want to really hammer this point home. We live in a post-World War II new world today, right? Where, because the Allies had won the war, they were able to build infrastructures and spread their ideologies in a way that was not possible before, okay? It was possible in the colonial period, but it wasn't possible in the interwar period. After 94, you could say, 1994, the situation became even more intense because the Cold War ended and the only ideological military power, which was the Soviet Union, had collapsed. We live in that context, which means we live in a dangerous world where you think you live where there is a monopoly of ideas, but you actually have the amplification of the Western post-colonial narrative and the suppression of the rest of the ideas. In that world, it's hard to take yourself out, it's hard to pull yourself out of the white man's shoes. We will continually...
The same argument would be made about an ignorant believer.
Yeah.
Because I've
Yes.
seen some muftis
Yes.
say a woman shouldn't
Yes.
sleep next to a wall because
Yes.
the wall is masculine.
No, that's ridiculous. Maybe,
Do you see
yes,
what I mean?
yeah,
That's what Mickey
yes, the same argument could be made with religion, yes. If someone is not critical, whether they be living in a post-colonial environment, or whether they be a religious believer, and they don't want to ask questions which strike at the heart of their own faith, okay, and at the heart of their own existence, then they will invariably be overtaken by the currents of the new world. And I believe that this is a serious situation which could overtake us in the form of this wave of globalization, right? Or this wave of American hegemony. I say that before asking, because the majority, I've been doing this now, a da'wah, for a while. I've noticed that the majority of questions that are put about Islam relate to someone putting themselves in this 21st century white man's bubble, anachronistically looking back at the Prophet's life and trying to superimpose their own value judgments on this, and also at the same time falsely assuming that everything they believe is true and everything we believe is false. You can't start with that premise. Just because we live in your country, it doesn't mean we're going to believe everything you're going to believe. I'm not saying you guys are, but that's the message I want to put to them.
Could be made about a Muslim country that someone
Of course. No doubt about it. Yes, but the point is this. Yeah. So I say this. If whoever it is believes in liberalism, then the heart of liberalism is critical inquiry. If you think about it, right? So we have to inquire critically: is liberalism itself, is democracy itself, is secularism, are these things worthy of being used as pseudo-ultimate truths that we now have to measure everything towards? Or are these things, as we've discussed and shown, practically, when actually operational, not able to actualize themselves in a full sense? And if that is the case, then to what extent are they effective? And if they're not effective completely, then we know that they're not perfect. And if we know they're not perfect, then how can we measure what claims to be perfection with that which we know for sure is imperfection? So next time we ask a question,
you're saying in order for something to be true, it has to be effective.
Sometimes, yes. I mean, it's
The Quran says don't drink. There's Muslims who drink.
yes. No. What I mean is that the ruling of not drinking is effective to one's spiritual and physical. Do you get it? All right. So the point is this.
Do you ever get doubts? Like,
No, Alhamdulillah. Now,
you used to it?
maybe when I was younger, critically and stuff, you always doubt. But when there came a time where literally I believe that Allah gave me a very strong sense of yaqeen, very strong sense,
Keep yourself not.
which means certainty.
How do you keep right? Like, I don't even know how to word that. Yeah.
How do I ground myself? Yeah,
How do you know that what you're thinking is true and not like?
because it makes sense to every.
Like that you've been.
Yeah,
In
well,
the way that to truly take on another perspective, to challenge it.
yeah, I get that. Do you know, because Islam has a way of proving itself, right? It has a falsification test. It has an inimitability test. It has evidences that aim to prove its reality. Its core message, which is the message of Tawheed, of believing in one God and worshipping one God, is a message which I believe not only appeals to my logical state of being, but also appeals to my existential spiritualism. And I believe that from all of those perspectives, Islam is no doubt the most effective, the most plausible, and the most rational recourse for me. Do you get what I'm saying? So I've come to that conclusion.